infractions. So as we launched this campaign, we did a lot of promotion and education, just raising awareness around what the consequences were of illegally dumping. We did a very strong campaign around what proper waste disposal methods were. So we talked about garbage, we talked about placing materials curbside, and we talked about construction and demolition debris as well. In addition to that, the promotions that we did, we also developed some guides to help private property owners, apartment buildings and businesses learn how to sort of protect their properties from illegally dumped materials. So we talked about things like signage, having proper lighting, screening your materials, which is a part of our bylaw in itself, but ensuring that you have your waste bins sort of protected from being open to the public. And we've had some really good successes with this initiative. We did also develop some signage. The red and orange sign on the left there is actually kind of based on a really cool sign that we found in Australia, and we have used this in some places to really raise awareness that a particular area is being monitored for illegal dumping. So when we start looking at the stats, I've presented 2022 and 2023 and 23-24 in this table. There is an increase that you'll see year over year in the cases reported. I would like to point out that because of the relationships we built and the work that we do with our internal parks and IMO staff, a lot of those cases are actually illegally dumped materials in parks. We've established a process with our park staff in particular where if they are providing service or maintenance to a park, removing and emptying the litter bins, if they're noticing bags of household waste and it looks like there might be some identifying information in those bins, they will contact us. So I will say, especially for this past fiscal year, about half of those cases are related to HRM parks. Not that it's okay to illegally dump in HRM parks, but I just wanted to flag that was because of sort of some increased cooperation and coordination that we have between our two departments. As far as finding evidence and actioning requests, we're finding about 50% of the time we're finding some identifying information in those bags. We're able to pursue the case further. We're finding that 74 to 76% of the time, the materials that we're finding illegally dumped are unsorted household waste. So that could be people who have excess bags, people who don't want to sort their materials for curbside collection, but it's really telling that all of the majority of the material, all of the material that we're finding had an easy option as far as disposal goes. A lot of times people could have placed this material curbside for collection and not taken those steps to go down the road and dump the bags on another property. You'll see from the difference between our education and warning. We do a lot of education, talking to people whose material is found, people who admit that, yes, I dumped that material in that location. We issue warnings. We have had good success with having voluntary cleanups by the people who have been accused of illegally dumping. Sometimes, they say, well, I didn't do it, but my name's in it, so I will go clean up. But I think it's really good to raise that awareness and let them know, you really need to be diligent about things like this, and be careful who you hire and make sure you're following up to ensure the material is managed appropriately. And we have issued an increased number of summary offense tickets over the years as well. So 27 last year and 35 this past year. So outside of the numbers, I think it's really important to highlight the collaboration that we've had and the partnerships that we've been able to establish through the implementation of this program. As I previously mentioned, we work really closely with our parks and IMO staff. Especially when we see dumping in HRM property, it's really important for us to get it cleaned up as soon as possible. So we go out and do our investigation, but we always make sure that material is cleaned up as soon as possible because we don't want it to attract additional. We have a saying, litter attracts litter, illegally dumped materials attract more dumping. So we want to get that cleaned up as soon as we can. We've also had some great success partnering with Halifax Regional Police and RCMP. If there are cases that come to their attention that they may not have the resources to address, we have been in contact with those organizations as well and developed some really good partnerships there. One of the first issues that came up when we started our illegal dumping program was along the Old Guysborough Road, and the work that we did with the Halifax International Airport Authority was excellent. There were some places along the road where people like to park and watch planes go by, and there were some illegal dump sites along there. So in partnership with HIAA, we did install some barriers, we did some cleanup, and knock on wood, we've had very few instances of additional materials being dumped. So certainly a plus there. And then, as I mentioned before, we've done a lot of work to educate property owners about properly managing their waste and ensuring that they're not doing things or keeping their bins in a state that would attract illegal dumping. I heard as recent as today that one of the properties that we've worked with has seen ongoing success with reduced illegal dumping incidents at their property. So it's really great to hear stories like that. So at the same time that we implemented the illegal dumping clauses in the bylaw, we also added some provisions around litter abatement. And one of those was the requirement to have a litter receptacle available in drive-throughs. Any restaurant that has a drive-through has to have a driver's side litter bin available. So when we implemented this for the effective date of April 1st, 2022, we, in advance of that time, we contacted over 200 drive-throughs in the municipality and gave them notice that this requirement was coming through. And between June and July of 2022, we completed random re-inspections of all of the 200 of locations, and we had a really high rate of compliance. And as my staff go out and do their day-to-day inspections at other ICI properties and at restaurants and whatnot, they're doing ongoing re-inspections of these sites, and we continue to see pretty high rate of compliance. So we think that that's been effective. So hopefully people are seeing a difference. It's one of those things that's really hard to measure, because we see the bins at the drive-throughs, but it's hard to tell what impact that has on litter that may be spread out throughout the municipality on the roadsides. The other initiative that we took on was around secure and tarped loads. There is definitely an issue at some points where vehicles aren't properly tarped as they're bringing waste to different waste facilities, whether that be landfill or construction and demolition are the two main ones. So in October of 2022, we did conduct a joint checkpoint with the RCMP on Prospect Road, and we were conducting inspections of vehicles. The other thing that my staff have done is they have made dedicated visits to those facilities for the sole purpose of identifying improperly tarped loads. We do have a provision in our bylaw that requires trucks to be tarped as they're going to the facility. So while we can't stop vehicles on the road, we can address them while they're on site at the facility. So we found that pickup trucks, not surprising, were the biggest offenders, and we only had a 52% compliance rate. So that really gave us an opportunity to kind of focus some education and awareness on that. We did issue some warnings on our first round of inspections, and we did provide notice that we would be issuing tickets on that at some point. So we are looking at doing that starting very soon. My staff are going to be starting to go out again to do those inspections at the waste facilities. So in addition to the update on what we've been up to for the last few years, we did include a request to update our bylaw in this report. And the request is around two different spots. The first one being the definition of illegal dumping. So the original definition that we included was very robust around the requirements for illegally dumped materials. It required that material need to be removed by a truck, which kind of signaled towards a very large amount of waste. It also required that there be hazards to the public or the environment included in that. So it really has kind of limited us, and we did have one case recently that went to court that the judge found the defendant not guilty based on the definition, even though the person had dumped the material, because the material didn't meet the definition of illegally dumped material. The case was overturned in that respect. The other amendment that we're looking to make is around simplification of the description of person responsible, and because there was a lot of language around ownership of material and proving different things, so we did request that some simplifications as far as that goes. So, questions?
Shannon, thank you very much for that presentation. Really important work, and no surprise, there's lots of people with questions on this topic, as there always is. And we'll start with the Deputy Mayor. Deputy Mayor, would you mind putting the motion on the floor, and then you can ask your questions.
It would be my pleasure, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Move that the Environment Sustainability Standing Committee recommend the Halifax Regional Council adopt bylaw S613, amending bylaw S600, the solid waste resource collection and disposal bylaw as set out in attachment D, staff report dated April 3rd, 2024.
Second.
Second by Councillor Lovelace. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Shannon. It's no secret that I think you're awesome, and how quickly you respond to all of my emails or questions, even on a Sunday afternoon when we're doing the litter cleanup and I'm trying to figure out where's that truck, because there's going to be a celebration of life in a couple of hours and we need to get all this cleaned up, so it's great. Colleagues, you should have seen Shannon and I on the Old Guysborough Road in almost hip boots in the woods, going around checking all the sites off out with the staff from the airport. It was an absolutely great project, and thank you, Shannon, for all of that good work. I was just on the Old Guysborough Road a couple of days ago, and unfortunately it's starting to look a little getting more activity lately. But then again, that's part of the spring, I think, experience that we're having. People do dump in the winter, the snow lifts up, and then we get to see more stuff, so it's interesting. And when Mr. Stickland's earlier presentation, all I could think of was all of those trails. A lot of those trails is where we see in the rural suburban place, that's where we see illegal dumping. And it is a huge concern. And I would be interested to know when, on the stats that were given, is there like heavier in some districts than others? Is it an urban problem? Is it a suburban rural problem? It would be interesting to know a little bit of that. But I guess the other thing is looking at the trails. Sometimes we have to be really careful about what the unintended consequences can be of some of these things, right? So I still think about the couple that doesn't live locally that have property at the end of the old Kelly Road, and people just love to drop construction waste there, and so they're responsible for it. They wouldn't even know that it's there. So we have some situations where it's really easy to, it's easier to see it, we know our own property, but when it's illegal dumping on private property, and the reverse onus is the issue that has some people really, if they can't find it, it's on their property, so they're responsible. So I'm trying to figure out how do we build with, and I love all the changes that are in here, I think that they're awesome, but I guess I'm wondering about those unique situations where we're trying to figure out the person is responsible for the property, but yeah, that's the only really concern that I think we haven't quite figured out yet, so thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. With regards to where the illegal dumping is happening, that's something that we've really learned over the course of this. The nature of what we're seeing is very different from what our colleagues in other parts of the province are seeing. I think that we definitely have a higher percentage of what I would call more urban illegal dumping. So that's people dumping material at the end of someone else's driveway, in dumpsters at commercial buildings. That's not to say that there's not illegal dumping happening in more rural areas, but it's not really being reported if it is. And and it does seem like we're not seeing it as much as what we kind of expected. You know, when you talk about illegal dumping, that's what you think about. You think about loads of construction and demolition debris being dumped in the woods, and that's definitely not what we're seeing as a rule of thumb, which hopefully that means it's not happening as frequently, but we'll see, you know. I guess that is a really interesting point with regards to talking about trails and private property, because if we're not able to identify someone responsible, it is the property owner's responsibility to clean that up. What my staff have been really great at doing is contacting property owners, and sometimes we're talking to people who are in other parts of the country. You know, they may not live locally, and they're not even aware that people are accessing their property. So that's kind of a flag for us. So like, we'll have people call and say, you know, I use this trail for whatever reason, and there's illegally dumped material. So we always make sure to contact the property owner and let them know. And then, you know, what happens after that? Sometimes they'll restrict access. But you know, we've had really good success. Like they're happy to know or grateful that we've contacted them to let them know this activity is happening. So, but yeah, it's unfortunately we're not at a place right now where we can provide cleanup services for private property owners, and it does still fall on them, unfortunately, to clean it up if we can't identify the offender.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Deputy Mayor, I agree. I think Shannon is awesome also. So, I think most of us do. Next on the list is Councillor Lovelace.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I also think that Shannon is amazing. You've answered so many of my calls over the last few years with regards to illegal dumping, you know, sites that are deep into the woods, and you know, staff have gone in there and just literally dragged out, you know, all this construction waste, furniture, and you know, some of which have been there for years and years. And so just want to say thank you. You know, those new signs that are going up at those kind of well-known dump sites that have been active for years are really helpful, because that gets people who are in the area using the trail or, you know, in the woods watching. They're now watching, you know, and they're catching the license plate and the make and model of the vehicle. And, you know, we really do rely on our residents to help us address illegal dumping. So I think we've come a really long way since 2021. This is fantastic. Good to see that we're, you know, tightening up some of those little gaps, especially in regards to the defining what illegal dumping is and looking at those smaller pieces. My questions are in regard to the requirement to contain, in particular, as we saw last year with the bears. We had a lot of issues with just people not containing their garbage appropriately, new buildings, new construction, and people who were just moving in were not as aware as they could be. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about the education and that, you know, that awareness building for folks who are living in bear country, and just to get a sense of, you know, how do we make sure that they're aware? Because when bears come in to compost and garbage, it ends up everywhere. So it looks like illegal dumping because they drag it off into the woods and into the trails and so on. And so I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about that education piece with regards to new construction in particular. The other thing is helping people understand that they are responsible when they hire a contractor or a company to take away their business, their garbage, whatever that business is. And so I'm just wondering if how are we doing with communicating that to residents, to, you know, to help them know that, you know, they should have a receipt, they should be using a reputable business to take their garbage away. So again, another question on education. And then my last question for you is just in regards to those difficult sites that are dangerous. Now, I know in Hughley in particular, and in Hubbards, we've had some dangerous materials that were left behind, and residents, you know, wonderful residents going in and they try to clean it up. And so I'm really worried that someone's going to get hurt. Some of these materials are toxic, and it's wonderful as a family going in and doing this cleanup. They really shouldn't be. So again, another education piece. How do we help people understand what the steps are when they do find illegal dumping? And again, thank you, Shannon, to you and your team. You guys do amazing work. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate all the accolades. Definitely my team deserves so much of the credit because they do a great job and they work really well with the public, and they very often go above and beyond, so big shout out to them for sure. With regards to screening of materials, so the containment of waste containers, yes, that is definitely something that's come up. And as we see kind of more density and more buildings, multi-residential buildings in more rural areas, it's something that we're definitely thinking about. It helps when we get feedback from the public and from councillors that there are issues in those areas, because then we are able to address. I know one particular location that we've spoken about not too long ago. We've had really good success with the property owners in sort of managing that a little bit better. They may not have been fully aware of what they needed to do, and things have been addressed. The topic on bears and wildlife in general is something that we do a lot of promotion on each year. We've worked with Natural Resources in the past, trying to get the messaging out about proper waste management, and it's something it's going to be one of those things that's an ongoing topic that we're talking about, especially as we start seeing more density and more buildings in those areas that are currently inhabited by wildlife. Regarding hiring people to manage waste, that is a really tricky one. When possible, we would certainly encourage people to hire known companies, but with the world being as it is, there are a lot of people that you can contact and hire off social media, for example, who we may not always be able to track those folks down. And so it's unfortunately one of those things that's a little more challenging to kind of keep tabs on, but we do try, and whenever possible, we will sometimes get requests from people asking, how do I get rid of this large quantity of waste or whatever, and we'll kind of direct them to the proper channels on how to hire a waste management company. Respecting difficult sites and dangerous sites to clean up. One thing that I always really try to encourage people to do is to register for like the litter cleanup program, so the Great Nova Scotia Pick Me Up. Through that program, they provide information on how to safely approach sites. One of the things that a lot of people don't really think about is doing cleanups on property that's actually private property.
Yes.
Because sometimes the property owners, you have really great intentions, but maybe the property owner is concerned. They don't want people on their property for liability issues or concerns or whatnot. So we definitely always advise people who are doing cleanups to contact the property owner to make sure that they do have permission to do that. That said, definitely I would say that if you come across an illegal dump site, call 311. That's the biggest thing, and that we can provide some guidance and support on how to best address that. Through the partnerships we've developed, like with Halifax Water, Nova Scotia Power, if there are sites on those properties, we've had really great success. The province as well, they're always very quick to want to go out and clean that material up. So those have been good partnerships, and we can usually stick handle getting those addressed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Up next is the other cool director councillor, Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Shannon and team. Just one question for a follow-up. You referenced that, like, as you deal with some of these folks, when you find the bag and there's the identifying piece of information, and then you talk to them, and sometimes the story is, oh, I'll come clean that up because I hired someone and I didn't realize that hiring this person, they went in, they just tipped it out the back of the truck in the dump site. Do we have any, do we do any follow-up in terms of, for some of them, it's probably the face-saving way to say you caught me without admitting it. But in other instances where do we would we follow up okay, who did you hire? Because we'll go after them. Because we shouldn't have contractors out there just taking money from people and then throwing things in wherever and pocketing a tip, what they're probably charging as a tip fee.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, that we always do. That's one of the first things. As through the investigative process, the officers will reach out to the person who's identified in the material. They're always cautioned, and we explain what the situation was. You're definitely right. I'm sure there are some cases where someone's looking to save face, but we do always try to get information on who they may have hired or who may have had possession of that material, and we do as much follow-up as we can, because we definitely would like to track down some of these folks who are making promises and not following through with them on properly managing material.
Yeah, well, I mean, in some cases, it's basically fraud, because the customer on the other end is really paying a dump fee as well, that then the unscrupulous contractor is just pocketing instead, on top of their other fee. Okay, I just wanted to make sure we were doing that and not just leaving it at the face-saving story if that's the case, but actually pursuing down to the person who had carriage over that waste. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Stoddard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you again, Shannon. I repeat everything that's been said. You and your staff are amazing. I was just wondering, how many diversion officers do you actually have? I know you just mentioned that you have another one, which is great, but existing, would you?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So we currently have 3 diversion planning officers. So our third staff member was hired specifically as part of the illegal dumping implementation plan. So that doesn't mean that one staff person does all of the illegal dumping complaints. So, the team kind of spreads that around. But in addition to illegal dumping, they do the litter piece. They also conduct inspections at commercial properties, at apartment buildings. They do inspections at Otter Lake of commercial loads that are coming in. So there's a lot on the go, and they're pretty busy, and they're very thorough with their roles. So.
Yeah, you touched base on one of the questions I was going to ask about restaurants. What about gas stations? I mean, they are known for having garbage and overflowing garbages and people just dumping things that they shouldn't dump at gas stations. Just wondering how you feel about that, if there's been progress made, sorry.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So I don't know specifically about gas stations. I know they are part of the ICI sector that we do conduct inspections on. If there are specific stations that are of concern, a call to 311 could definitely prompt a site visit so that we can ensure that they're employing appropriate waste management measures. And also, if a gas station is having issues with the illegal dumping, we would certainly look at conducting inspections to see what we could do to stop that from happening.
Yes, because I was thinking of receipts for gas purchases or sundry purposes that might have some information on it. You mentioned too as well about restaurants. About restaurants. Are they complying for the most part? Are they putting, say, green bin waste in garbage cans or in garbage pickup? Do you monitor that, or do you have any time to monitor that?
Yes, so restaurants are definitely part of our repertoire as far as conducting inspections. And I would say that we have really good compliance, in particular on the back end at restaurants. When you have staff who are managing the waste and separating, they are doing a good job. On the front end, especially at quick service, we see those bins that are out front, and they do have garbage bins, organics bins, and recycling bins. It is definitely a challenge in that quick service atmosphere and setting to have good source separation practices by the public. So I think what you're seeing on the front end is a little bit different than what you're seeing on the back, in back of house. And for the most part, we're doing a much better job behind the counter.
That's encouraging. I'm not sure what my time is, Mr. Chair. We can have closing comments.
Okay, just
Just a quick one. Just on the positive side, I'm very encouraged to see students doing cleanups around the schools. There was one recently at Halifax West and one at Ridgecliff Middle School, and they had bags and bags and bags of garbage, and the pile was immense, and I was very proud of them for getting that done, and I encouraged other residents to do as much. So I have a couple of questions, Mr. Chair, but I'll come back. Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Shannon, and to your team. You've helped clean up at least half a dozen big messes in my district. One of them, I think, illustrates one of the problems you're dealing with. I had a housing complex with some big dumpsters where almost on a weekly basis, furniture was appearing, appliances, massive amounts of garbage. So someone in the middle of the night was using someone else's dumpster to drop their garbage off. How difficult is it, and that situation's been improved now, but how difficult is it to investigate that type of illegal dumping where someone's just using someone else's dumpster, and is there more we can do on enforcement in those situations? And just a couple other questions too. Do we work with province of Nova Scotia on Crown land cleanups and that sort of thing? And do we need more in terms of penalties for improperly tarped loads? Thank you.
Thank you through you, Mr. Chair. So with regards to dumpsters at any commercial property, apartments, is a really good example. Depending on the type of material, it can be easier. When we're talking about appliances or large pieces of furniture, unless we have a witness or there's a camera that captures a picture of a license plate, there's really not a whole lot we can do, unfortunately. We've had both cases where we've had that happen, where we've been able to identify someone, and yeah, so it's a challenge, and we even talk about, sometimes we'll get phone calls about, brush that's been dumped in an empty lot, or, it could be bricks or something like that, and it's, unfortunately, there's not really much we can do about that, because if there's no witness, we have nothing to go on. With respect to Crown land, yes, we've had great success working with the province. We have contacts with the TIR, and they're quite responsive about they want to know what's happening on their land. We don't have eyes everywhere, so you're gonna have to help each other out with that. So that's definitely been a success. And your third question was, do we need more in terms of penalties
For improperly tarped loads.
For improperly tarped loads? It's a tricky one. I think the past couple of years is the first time that we've really done a really focused effort at doing inspections at the waste facilities. So I'm hoping that will help. Anecdotally, speaking to the facility operators, once we started doing that, they did see a marked improvement in compliance. So word spreads fast when you start having enforcement standing in front of a tip scale, looking at what's on the back of your truck. So I'm hoping that will help. We do hope to be involved and continue to do the checkpoints with the RCMP and with HRP as far as what we can do on the street. But there probably is a bit more that we can do, but it's difficult. Whether penalties are the right avenue for that. But I think increased visibility of enforcement efforts are definitely helping.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Before we go around the second round, colleagues don't mind, I have a couple of questions, if I may, for the Chair. Shannon, interesting, Councillor Morris talked about penalties. This motion, this work you've been doing now, we've come a long way. I think originally it used to be the maximum fine $200 an hour for illegal dumping, not just the tar piece. I think we have the ability to go up to $10,000 now. Is that correct? Is that accurate?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So when the bylaw was first amended, just because of the time it takes to go through the Justice Department to be added to the summary offense ticket, originally the tickets that we were issuing were I can't remember the exact dollar amount, it was like $200 plus that, $397.50 or something along those lines. So once the provisions made it to the summary offense booklet, that fine amount did go up. So now if you get a ticket for illegal dumping, the ticket amount is like $697.50 or something. I can't remember the exact dollar amount, but yeah. So what we have seen is that we have more people who are disputing their tickets. That's they're able to do that. So.
But the fine came up even higher than that. Is that correct?
So yeah, the way it works, so the fine amounts can go up to $10,000. What that would involve would be a long form prosecution. So if it was like a major dump site and, or if it was persistent or we found the same person over and over again, we could go long form on that and go to court and request a higher fine amount.
I think the success of this program, and it's fantastic success, we've come a long way. The two things that are key is the fines and the ability to go to that amount, and having a full-time investigator and the reverse onus if someone's actually digging through. I think that's made the big difference. I have a question about education. So you talk about education, you talk about signage. Are you doing education like we do for how to recycle, how to sort? Are you doing that kind of education where you're actually going out to community groups and talking about it? Or I know when we do the recycling education, we can go to seniors groups and so on. Is education just mainly to signage and some social media, or is it more than that?
So Mr. Chair, I guess it's a little trickier with something like this because the people that we're kind of trying to target are people who are doing something illegal.
Right.
As far as our general public awareness, when we talk about waste sorting and all of that, we talk about what to do, how to report illegal dump sites. So that's one piece of it. But then the other piece is kind of just more broader awareness, just to let people know, and hopefully the people who are illegally dumping will see this and say, oh, the municipality, has a program and they're watching out for dumping. And it's funny because a lot of times people they're not really even they don't really understand that what they've done is illegal dumping. Like we've had some cases where we've gone to a house and we found their name in some garbage bags, and they said, oh, well, I thought it was okay to dump there. And it's like, well, if you don't have permission to use that container, then you can't do that. So that's where the education piece comes in. It's a kind of more one-on-one when we find people.
An ask that I had, and maybe I already do, is to make sure if you could share that signage through examples with the council office. I believe all of us do newsletters and things of that sort, and so we should be promoting that. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, that'd be great. You talked about hotspots earlier on, and so are we seeing a change in the hotspots? So you've identified a hotspot, you're doing some investigation, you may have even done some enforcement there. Is the hotspots in comparison to what we did before, is that changing? Is that now, we originally identified a hotspot, now it's no longer a hotspot?
So fortunately, we've had some really good success. Early on, there were some definite hot spots that were very frequent topics of conversation in the office, and I will say that for the most part, it seems like those have kind of died down. The other thing that's happened is because of the familiarity the officers have with different areas, when they're out about their business, they'll swing by certain locations just to take a look and see if there's been any new activity. So being proactive in that respect has certainly been helpful as well.
And that's great news. And two more quick questions. The drive-through motor receptacles, we had stopped that for a period of time, and there was a big complaint because of the drive-through operators saying they were responsible to sort the material. Is that still the case? If I go through a drive-through and there's a receptacle there and I throw stuff in it, does the owner of that drive-through have to sort what's in there? If that's the case, how has that been working?
So that was a concern that came up. I think it may have even been before the actual implementation date. Where the intent of having those receptacles in the drive-thrus was to prevent litter in the broader community, we did say that sorting wasn't necessary. So we don't have an expectation that those would be sorted.
That's good. And the last thing, I really think this update is important to all regional council. Is the intent to do that so that everybody in council is aware of what's been going on?
If that's that's what the committee and council would like, I'm more than happy to present it.
Yeah, I think I'm seeing nods in your heads, and I'm thinking of the young man that sits next to the deputy mayor, who are very interested in this topic of illegal dumping. Thank you very much, colleagues. Second time around, Deputy Mayor, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know, Dorothy, were we timing him?
Chair's prerogative, apparently.
Thank you, Shannon.
All right, I'll do 25 push-ups now, all right.
Shannon, I found it interesting when you had said, compared to other cities, our urban rate might be a little bit higher, that percentage might be a little bit higher. Did I hear that correctly?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that was more related to rural parts of Nova Scotia.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was my frame of reference there.
And so I'm kind of curious about where your stats, the stats here about where we see the illegal dumping, and what it might look like. Where does that information and how does it connect into the decisions that HRM makes about how many, the garbage bag limit that we might provide? And would there be, is that a place to be more proactive, that if we're seeing, that it's another bag in somebody else's property, or it's just a little bit of something, could we, or can that information feed into the decision about the garbage bag limits that we have for people?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's a really interesting thought. I think given that it's such a small percentage of the population that is contributing to this issue, I don't know that would be the appropriate approach. But I think it definitely comes down to more education, especially when we get that one-on-one chance to educate people.
So when I think about us refining the definition, and the definition can be one bag.
Right.
So I was just trying to make the connection then about, so, interesting. Thanks.
Thank you,
Mr.
Deputy
Chair.
Mayor. Councillor Stoddard?
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of questions, if you don't mind, Shannon. I've had a lot of residents contact me about extra bags. And they say, well, to put it out every 2 weeks, it's gonna take forever. Have you ever contacted the waste facility and asked them about extra bags? There's an option to call in or to say, next week I'm gonna have 10 bags of cleaning up my basement or something like that. Just curious about that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we do sometimes get calls from residents asking about that. I think it's important for people to know that to drop material off at the Otter Lake facility, we do have a flat fee charge. If you have, basically similar to the equivalent of what a curbside setup would be, is only $5. So that's an easy way to get rid of excess material all in one shot. So we would do that. If it's a persistent thing that they always have over limit bags, we would definitely like the opportunity to chat with them, provide some education. Sometimes people don't realize that they're putting things in the garbage that they could actually be recycling. So we've had a lot of success, doing some more one-on-one education with residents in that respect.
Yeah, I had a couple of residents contact me because they were over baggage and they got ticketed. They got a ticket on their garbage and they were a little annoyed because they were trying to get rid of excess things. One example was personal hygiene products by a senior, and she said, well, I'd like to have more than one bag out for personal reasons, and I had to check with Otter Lake and there was a limit and she wasn't able to go over that. Just a numbers thing, I noticed that in 2022, the cost was approximately $6.5 million, and the street lighting was not measured until 2023, which was $2.5 million. So the total cost of 2022 was $9 million. I'm just wondering about the numbers and the dates.
Councillor, I think you're jumping ahead just a step. That's the next report.
Okay.
Ready? Was there anything else?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Thank you. I have a question of clarification for you, Councillor Stoddard. When you talked about the example of the lady with the extra bags, you said ticketed, you mean sticker, right? It wasn't a fine, it was a sticker.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, just want to make sure, thank you. Seeing no one else on the board, will someone call for the question? Question's been called for. All those in favor of the motion on the floor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That motion is carried. Shannon, thank you very much, and to your team, really appreciate it.
Tuesday.
All right, next up is 13.1.2 corporate renewals energy purchase options. I believe Mr. Butler's here to talk about that. Would somebody like to put that on the floor, please? Councillor Austin, you can put them on the floor, that'd be great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's recommended that the Environment and Sustainability Standing Committee recommend that Halifax Regional Council, 1, direct the CEO to enter into negotiations with both Roswell and the Green Choice Program administrators to purchase renewable electricity for corporate consumption from either or both parties as deemed most suitable to the municipality, and 2, award and execute an alternative procurement agreement for the provision of renewable electricity with one or both suppliers, subject to terms and conditions agreeable to HRM and approved by legal services.
Second.
Second by the Deputy Mayor, Councillor?
No presentation on this then, eh?
That's correct, no.
Okay, I mean, I don't have any detailed questions. I mean, this is one of these things we have to do one or the other, right? Maybe some combination of both, because there's no way we get to net zero if we don't address our electricity piece. And so I'm happy that this is coming forward because, you know, we can't achieve our even internal goals without it. So, although Roswell was a bit of a surprise, I had no idea that we had somebody else out there. I thought it was Green Choice was the only potential game in town for us here. So that's kind of interesting. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Stoddard, I believe you have a question.
Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chair. I was getting ahead of myself on my notes. In 2022, the cost was approximately $6.5 million, but the street lighting wasn't added until 2023 at $2.5 million. So the total of 2022 was approximately $9 million. I'm just wondering, if you're looking at 2 different years, how are you able to combine them for 2022, please?
Mr. Butler?
Kevin Boulay, Manager of Clean Energy, through Mr. Chair to the Councillor. So that is an error, it is all 2023. We had energy values for 2022 when an initial draft of this was written. It took a little bit. We did get 2023 values, so this is most current.
Great, thank you. I was a little confused and I thought the numbers didn't quite wash. Thank you for that, I appreciate it. Thank you to your team.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? Seeing none, I'll ask you to call the question. Question's been called for. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? That motion is carried. Kevin, another question I have is, do we only see the bow tie at Regional Council now? The committees don't get it?
The new jacket, it seems
Too formal to have a bow tie. At least that's what my wife said.
We won't take offense.
That's okay. Thank you, Kevin. And I'll just stay put just in case there's a question, because
The next item is yours also. 13.1.3, proposed amendments to the Nova Scotia Building Code regulations. Would someone like to put that motion on the floor? Councillor Austin?
It's recommended that the Environment and Sustainability Standing Committee recommend that Halifax Regional Council request that the mayor write a letter to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing urging for the adoption of the proposed Nova Scotia Building Code regulations as described in this report.
Second by the Deputy Mayor. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and you know, maybe my old memory is failing me here, but didn't we have this come through council a few weeks ago?
Mr. Butler?
I'll let Shannon take care of that.
Welcome, Shannon.
Thank you, Shannon Miedema, Director of Environment and Climate Change. Yes, this is a little deja vu for the Environment and Sustainability Standing Committee at the request of the CAO. We pulled it back from the last regional council meeting that it was targeting to add a little bit more information from the planning and development perspective, because it's such an active file, and their we weren't really looped into their conversations with the Housing Accelerator Fund and affordability, and wanted to make sure that everyone was still on the same page.
So, in my foggy memory, I have seen this before, that is correct, but I haven't seen this before at regional. I've seen it here, so we've just hauled it back here to put more detail, and it hasn't yet gone to regional, and so it hasn't yet, we haven't formally put our position forward to the province yet then.
Correct.
Okay, now I'm following. This remains as urgent as it was last time we all
Yes.
talked about it, because again, another piece of Halifax, unless we have people who from outside doing things, in this case the province, looking at housing and not just kind of reflexively saying anything that causes any expense or delay, no matter how tiny, in the housing situation is just unacceptable to add, because every single thing we're building now, it's gonna be something we're gonna then be paying to retrofit down the way. If you wanna talk housing affordability, you know, a huge chunk of all our costs is heating and powering our buildings, and you know, I think this is one of these cases where you've got a bit of a market failure, because we know some of our really good developers in town who are building buildings for the long haul. I'm thinking folks like, well, like your Dexels, that like they build something with an idea that we own this asset for 30, 40, 50 years. And so for them, it's like, well, yeah, of course we should reduce all our costs and make things energy efficient. If you're just out there flipping something, the cost of not building that energy efficiency ends up getting borne by the person who buys it, who doesn't necessarily factor that in. So, you know, this is one of those places where it's the job of government to fix that. So hopefully the province will heed our call, along with, I know there's other people active on this issue as well. Thank you.
So Councillor, it's clear as mud now?
I think what we're doing is clear as mud.
Yes, thank you, sir. Councillor Lovelace.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for this. Yeah, what he said, you know, I mean, this is very urgent. We need to get this taken care of. But at the same time, I've had a few conversations with folks who are really concerned about the lack of radon testing and awareness in the provincial building code. And so I'm just, you know, I'm really curious to see where, and if this is something you can speak to, as far as the protection of people as we continue to build more and more underground with basement apartments. Certainly there is a requirement to put in, you know, the, what is it called? To put in the barrier that's there, but no one's actually testing the air quality. And certainly what we're doing to move forward with this to create community resilience, to obviously address the health and wellness by advancing and upgrading the building code. But if we're not focused on looking at those high-risk areas with regards to radon, I'm really concerned about how we're advancing and improved air quality in these basement apartments. I'm just hoping that you can speak to that for me, please.
I'll introduce myself. I'm Dawson Patterson. I'm currently the acting manager of building standards in P&D. Through you, Mr. Chair, to answer the question, and that's really some of the edits that have been added to the report, is just full transparency with this adoption of the 2020 building code. The proposed amendments include much more than just the energy efficiency, although that's a primary objective. There's also some other changes that work in part or as a result of those energy efficiency. So making our homes tighter and while maintaining the quality of the air. Gas barriers specifically as it relates to radon. I know Dr. Strang has been doing a lot of information and educational sessions around radon awareness. Certainly the second leading cause, if not the leading cause of lung cancer. You've got a whole department of building officials that provide that education to new homeowners and developers and stress the importance of the indoor air quality. Education around our mechanical ventilation systems. A lot of people refer to an HRV or an air exchanger as a waste of energy. I'm just pumping warm air outside. That's really the educational piece of controlling those air changes to ensure our health and safety, but as also to reclaim that heat. A lot of the modern appliances, as a result of Shannon's work, right, are highly efficient and reclaim a lot of that heat. So, yeah, along that. Hopefully that answers your question.
Well, but in addressing the improved air quality, if that barrier is, insufficient, and because radon exists along, in most District 13, right? We are in a high-risk radon area, probably most of Nova Scotia. And we're not encouraging homeowners to actually put that radon testing into their homes. I know Health Canada is doing that, but I'm just wondering, what is it that we're doing to help people ensure that they are testing? Because it's not a requirement of the building code.
That's correct. So it's not a that's correct. It's not a mandatory requirement to test for radon. That's still an elective, I guess. What is mandatory though is that you comply with the prescriptive requirements around mitigating the ingress of radon. So, you know, plastic underneath the floor slab and on our walls is just one barrier against radon, but it's the mechanical ventilation. Our modern homes, without the mechanical ventilation, we see an increase in radon concentration. But the mechanical ventilation certainly plays a huge part in mitigating the radon, even without testing, whether it exists or not.
I guess the proof is in the pudding to see whether or not we have a drop in lung cancers, right? Like, that's really what we need to see across the province. Thank you so much, that's a great answer. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering, you've kind of laid this out very well for us in the report, but I'm just wondering if you could summarize a little bit and talk about the timing of the province's decision and the fact that we're moving forward with Housing Accelerator Fund and probably the biggest housing boom we've had in Halifax ever. And these buildings will be built without any of the, without the best energy efficiency requirements. So I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about how serious this is, if you see it as a significant missed opportunity perhaps, and just briefly the repercussions for us.
So through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, I guess not to comment on the opinions of the timing, however, every day that a stronger building code, efficiency building code is delayed, that's more buildings that are being built to a standard that is not in alignment with what Halifax says we need to be. There's going to be federal retrofit codes that come down the lines in short years, which will require very costly retrofits for individuals. So essentially what we're doing now by building to this lower standard, we're locking in high energy costs for individuals, and there's definitely an affordability issue associated with that. So some other co-benefits of this is the Nova Scotia Power is mandated to be 80% renewables by 2030. It's going to cost a lot more if we're using a lot more electricity to do that. So that's going to be put down to ratepayers as well. So everything we can do now, where it's the most cost effective at the building stage, is really critical to achieving a low carbon and an affordable future as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Stoddart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question around PSAs. Do we regularly send those out to residents, or is that something the province would do? Just curious.
Mr. Chair, through you, the councillor, just for clarification, you mean like public service announcements related to building code, or just generally?
Just radon, to increase awareness. It might not be, but I just thought I'd throw it out there.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, not to my knowledge, we have a colleague on our team who is very keen on radar detection and CO2 detection, and I'm pretty sure the Halifax Public Libraries does have some, they have some testing kits and stuff that I don't know how much they advertise that, but perhaps it's something that can be done.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
Yeah, they do. The library does they have the kits, and people can just take them out for free, and it's a great program. For Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just two follow-ups. Has there been any, I just know what's been in the news. Has there been anything informally, like in conversations with the province on this issue? In terms of that indefinite pause, is it do we have any kind of sense? Is it still something that they're actively looking at, or is the indefinite pause basically we're not doing it anytime soon?
Thanks again. Is that on? There we go. Thanks again for the question. Through you, Mr. Chair. There's a lull in that conversation. It was quite an active conversation around some of that, the advertisement of the potential for adoption, and then of course the delay. It was a big source of some detailed conversation. But recently, the position of the code coordinator at the provincial level, the individual responsible for the implementation, right, of the new code, is currently vacant. So that's a big change, right, since March, when this report was here before. So to answer your question, no, that conversation is not terribly active at the moment.
Well, you start to read some political tea leaves in that, don't we? Where there was an active, engaged staff conversation, and then all of a sudden it stopped. Okay. So I guess then, if there's not a whole lot of conversation, it kind of nullifies my next question, which was going to be about because the one thing that's striking in the report is, and I don't know if this is probably something we need to push on when this comes to regional council, certainly with our provincial friends. Do you realize that you're going to potentially imperil all this federal funding that we will just not get? Is that something that we have just ascertained from the federal government? Like, where's that piece coming from?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. So that was part of the announcement from the federal government in April 2nd, 2024. It's in that Canada Housing Infrastructure Fund. So it was part of the announcement to be like, there's a ton of money on the table, but there are some conditions attached to it. One of them is adopting the building code by January 1st, 2025. So, yeah.
Well, every now and then, isn't it nice for our provincial folks to feel to realize how we feel down at this end when things just get announced and posted to them? Thank you.
So, Councillor, I do look forward to that cup of tea.
Yeah.
Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What are the next steps for this statement or our position here? Is this going to be made public through a public letter or in the media or on our website, or what's the comms plan?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. So if this is approved by regional council, staff will draft the letter on behalf of the mayor. It'll be submitted to the minister or the premier. Typically, they are all public should someone request it. They're not typically, sent out to the ether unless somebody does request that. That's typically how it's worked in the past. I don't know if it's, maybe a request of council to make it differently, but traditionally that's how it's been done. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it's such a sweeping, has such a sweeping impact on our climate plan. Perhaps we need to take a different approach this time. Thank you.
I think, Councillor Austin, you spoke twice, but there are different rules in Dartmouth, so go ahead, be very quick.
Push-ups, Mr. Chair.
Okay, all right.
Just quickly on Catherine Morris's point, I'm wondering if when we send this to regional, whether or not we can have a suggestion that we should do a presentation at regional, because part of the reason to have council put a stamp on this is to also generate public notice and understanding of it, and so I think it would be a good one to actually do a presentation.
I think we all agree that's a great suggestion. Kevin and Shannon's now are noting that, I'm sure, so we'll aim for that. Good suggestion. Thank you, Councillor.
Thanks.
Seeing no one else on the board, I'll ask for the question be called. The question's been called for. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Anyone opposed? That motion is carried. Very important work. Thank you very much to all three of you. That's fantastic. Moving on, next is motions. There are none. No in-camera items. Are there any added items, Madam Clerk? No. I see a big no. Any notice of motions? Seeing none. The date of the next meeting is June 13, 2024. We call someone call for adjournment. So called by the Deputy Mayor. Thank you very much, everyone, and then millions watching at home. So great.